So the Georgia races were last night, and I have to say, as I did say on Twitter before we got the results rolling in, I honestly had no earthly idea what was going to happen. None whatsoever. Zero. And, usually when we talk about different elections, I have some sense of how it's going to go, or at the very least, based on the data I've seen, I've developed some kind of an opinion. This was one of the races where I was utterly clueless. You could flip a coin. Just flip a coin. I thought any outcome was possible. I thought it's possible that the Republicans win both seats. I thought it's possible that the Democrats win both seats. I thought it's possible they split the ticket. I thought it's possible they split the ticket in either direction. So what ended up happening is it looks right now as if the Democrats have officially won one of the races. That's the Warnock versus Loeffler race. That one has been called by pretty much everybody. I don't know if there's anybody who hasn't called it. And then in the Ossoff versus Perdue race, Ossoff is up, and some outlets have already called it for Ossoff. Others are waiting until we get the final 1% to roll in. Or actually 2% because it's 98% of the vote in, at least as of an hour ago or so. So some outlets have called that one for Ossoff as well. Others are holding off, but it's looking very likely that Ossoff is going to win that because he's already up, and the votes that are coming in are from majority Democratic areas. So it's looking good for the Democrats, man, and this would mean that the Democrats have taken control of the Senate, which means that now they have no excuse not to actually do good things. Now they don't have a scapegoat. I mean, what they're going to try to do, what they'll try to say is, the Republicans are blocking us and they're going to filibuster everything. And since they're filibustering everything, we can't get anything done. But that's kind of bullshit because they could pass a lot of stuff through budget reconciliation, which means you only need 51 votes to pass it. You don't need the 60. The 60 is what you need if they filibuster. But if you go through budget reconciliation for a lot of these different things, which you can, then all you need is 51 votes, and they have 51 votes. So as everybody was talking about yesterday on Twitter, overnight, now Joe Manchin is the most powerful person in the country. Joe Manchin, the most conservative Democrat, is now the most powerful person in the country, and I don't think it's even close. So we're going to have to use a lot of pressure, and we're going to have to make these people fall in line, and we're going to have to make them do our bidding. Now, how did this race unfold? How did we get to this point? Why is it that it looks like the Democrats picked up both seats? I have three answers to that. The first one is pretty simple. According to all the numbers we have at this point, the African-American turnout in Georgia was through the roof. It was a colossal turnout among black voters in Georgia. So that helped the Democrats. The other thing is Trump is scaring the pants off of the suburbs. You know how in the 2020 election with Biden, one of the more interesting dynamics is that Biden took from Trump's core base, which is suburban, middle class, and upper middle class white people. That's why Biden was able to win Georgia. Or, I'm sorry, that's not why Biden was able to win Georgia. There's different reasons for why Biden was able to win Georgia in the 2020 race. But he was able to win Arizona. He was able to win Arizona because he took from that Trump suburban vote, which was previously a lockup for him, and then, Biden swept in and put a big dent in Trump's lock on the suburbs. And what we saw in this race is a similar dynamic where now the suburbs are they're done with Trump. It's only Trump's most hardcore supporters who happen to be, and I don't know how to say this word, everybody makes fun of me because I suck at saying it, rural fuck. I don't know how to say it. Rural voters support Trump overwhelmingly. They're part of that hardcore right-wing base that's never going to abandon him. But suburban voters are done with him. And it's interesting because, again, anecdotally, I've seen this in my life too, where I have family members who were previously big-time Trump supporters, and then even they have turned on him post this election, where they're like, dude, you got to get over it. You lost the race. We're not going to tank American democracy over the ego of a reality star real estate buffoon. We're just not going to do that. We're not going to destroy the country and our, constitutional Republican representative democracy because this guy's throwing a tantrum and he doesn't know how to take an L. So, and again, these are people who were strong Trump supporters, in my opinion, in my family, who switched on him. Now, again, that's anecdotal, but the data is bearing it out in terms of how much the suburbs are abandoning him. So those are the first two things. I think they're important. Black turnout was through the roof. Trump is scaring the suburbs, and like the flight of the suburbs to the Democratic Party is, it's a real trend. It's a real trend, and it's something that the Republicans need to fear. But beyond that, and this might be the most important reason why I think the Democrats ended up pulling this out, and it was Crystal Ball who first pointed this out to me, and I think she's 100% correct. $2,000 checks was the closing message from Democrats. In other words, they went full economic populist in the closing, 3 weeks of this campaign. You had John Ossoff, you had Warnock, you even had Biden, and we're going to get to that story a little bit later, too. You even had Biden out there saying, listen, Democrats win the Senate. If Democrats win the Senate, we're passing $2,000 checks, and we're doing it immediately. So do you want help or do you not want help? Do you want relief? Do you want stimulus money? Do you want to be able to pay the rent and pay the mortgage or not? If you want to do that, you vote Democratic. We're going to be able to do that. So listen, they're on the record. It is crystal clear. There is no backpedaling from this. And if they do backpedal from this, then, you could say whatever the hell you want to say about the Democrats because they're shooting themselves in the foot and they're turning their back on the most straightforward promise they ever made. So the real move now is you promise the $2,000 checks, you go through budget reconciliation. Even if you lose Manchin, which I don't know if you will, you might not lose Manchin with the $2,000 checks. But even if you lose him, you get Hawley. And so you're going to have the 51 votes. So listen, they promised the $2,000 checks. That was their closing message. Now we're going to see whether or not they meant it or if they're all talk and if they're complete fraud liars. And if they don't pass the $2,000 checks, complete fraud liars is the answer. But if they have a modicum of integrity and respect left anywhere in their pathetic bodies, then they're going to do this. And that's a giant win. And listen, I'll reserve judgment until I see what they do. But if they do it, then keep it real, man. It's all worth it. It was all worth it. It was worth it for the Democrats to win back the Senate. It was worth it for Biden to become president. Now, here's why I didn't know how this election was going to unfold, because I thought it was a little more complicated than the way Crystal Ball laid it out. Because Trump came out for the $2,000 checks, so I thought people would think, well, Trump is for it, so maybe the Republicans will give us the $2,000 checks. Trump forced Perdue and Loeffler to that place where they were like, yeah, I support the $2,000 checks. So I thought it was a little more complicated, but no, it turns out the American people really were following it, and they realized who's most responsible for blocking the $2,000 checks. It's a man by the name of Mitch McConnell. Because Trump said, I want $2,000. Pelosi said, bet, I'm going to pass that through the House right now. They passed it through the House, and then it was sitting with Mitch McConnell, and Mitch McConnell put a poison pill in the bill, or poison pills, I should say, the Section 230 thing he put in there, and he put in maybe the thing about renaming the Confederate bases, and tanked it on purpose. His point was to tank it on purpose. And the American people were following this close enough because people are hurting so much that they were like, oh, I see who the problem is here. The problem is clearly Mitch McConnell. The problem is the Republicans. And even though Trump came out at the last minute for $2,000 checks, he's gone. So Biden says he's going to do it. They tell me if the Democrats win the Senate, they're going to do it. Okay, so here we go, baby. Let's go. Let's do it. Let's do the $2,000 checks. So what does this show you? It shows you what we've been screaming from the rooftops from day one, which is economic populism is the way to go. If you run on economic populism, people will go, oh, that's pleasant. I think that will help me. I want to vote for the person who's going to materially help me. And so here we are. They voted for the people who said they're going to materially help them. I mean, this is great. This is great for the Democrats. This is terrible for the Republicans. They're now caught. They're caught in a weird place because the party's fracturing right in front of our eyes. You have the Trump right, and then you have the more establishment right. And there's a big split that's opening up more and more as we talk. And it looks like the GOP is headed for a civil war. And yummy in my tummy. That's not to say the Democrats have it all figured out. That's not to say the Democrats don't have internal strife. Of course they do. Of course they do. You have the left. There's a lot of tension between the left, who actually believes in Medicare for all and free college and a living wage and ending the wars and all these good things, Green New Deal, and the corporate Democrats who are just neoliberals, who are fine with the status quo. There's a big fracture on the left, but there's been for a long time. On the right now, this is the beginning of an internal fight that the likes of which we haven't seen in a long time. In my lifetime, maybe in my lifetime. So anyway, really good news for the Democrats, really good news for the American people insofar as they do the $2,000 checks. And hey, moving forward, maybe you learn a lesson. The lesson is if I materially help the American people or promise to do that, they will reward me. So listen, credit to Bernie too, and to Hawley, because they dragged that Overton window back to the left. As soon as they came out and unapologetically argued for, originally Bernie wanted to do the $2,000 a month, and he was signed on to that bill with Kamala Harris of all people, who then never said another word about it, but I digress. But then Hawley and Bernie brought back up $1,200 checks when the consensus in D.C. was, let's do a stimulus bill with no stimulus checks. Bernie and Hawley stepped up and they were like, how about no? How about we do $1,200 checks just like the last time? How about that? And so what happened was the negotiations behind the scenes went from $0 in stimulus checks for people, and then Bernie and Hawley dragged them to $600 for the American people, and then Trump jumped in at the last minute and said $2,000, and so now we're at a place where $2,000 is front and center. Biden was dragged to the $2,000 position. The Georgia candidates were dragged to the $2,000 position. Even Loeffler and Perdue, kicking and screaming, were dragged to that position. So it became the political consensus. And now the Democrats won on that promise. So run on materially helping people, run on giving people cash in the middle of a depression, and it works out for you. I mean, you're taking a state that's generally viewed as a red state, and now you just flipped it blue. It voted for Biden against Trump, and now voted for Ossoff, although we'll see that's not 100% final yet, but it's close. And they voted for Warnock. That one is final. And by the way, Perdue and Loeffler are two of the most corrupt people in all of Washington, D.C., and that's saying a lot, because you know that place is just packed full of corrupt motherfuckers. They are bad. Remember, Loeffler's the one who, she started selling stocks like crazy when they had that internal meeting before COVID really hit hard, and senators were told COVID's going to hit really hard, and this thing is going to tank the market. Do with that information whatever you will. They immediately panic sold a bunch of stocks. Millions of dollars worth, I believe. And by the way, she was never elected. She basically bought that seat. She bought that seat. And her husband's also engaged in all these massively corrupt deals. And on top of that, her personality is basically anti-charisma. It's the opposite of charisma. And Warnock seems, at least insofar as he ran his campaign, good. So listen, the good takeaway from this election is that it actually makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, it makes sense in the sense that the people who are aggressively campaigning on $2,000 checks won. The people who want to materially improve your life won. The Republican side was comically corrupt. The Democratic side, at least Warnock, Ossoff's a slightly different story, but he was running a campaign that was actually sort of really good. Running against war, running for healthcare for everybody. These were the old sermons they dug up. The Republicans dug up these old sermons of Warnock, and everything he said was awesome. And they're like, aha, we got him. You got him what? Because he was against the Iraq war? What are you, crazy? So this result makes the world make sense a little bit more. But now, remember, don't let anybody gaslight you on this point. I hate using that word gaslighting. It's so overused. But what we need to do now, don't take any shit from the Democrats. You have to go 100% at the Democrats' jugular and let them know we're not playing around. We're going to have to make you do all the good things that you pretended to be in favor of. We're going to make you actually be in favor of those things. So don't let anybody try to play the rah-rah Team Democrat thing on you. Make them do the stuff they said they were going to do. But either way, it's a positive result. Everybody should be happy about this, and $2,000 checks may very likely be on the way shortly.